Now in this section, I'd like to look at Docker in somewhat brief detail. So we're not going to go into depth in terms of what Docker is, but we're just going to have a brief look at Docker, and we're going to obviously look at it from the perspective of deploying our application. So we're not really going to go into deep into it, but we're going to get enough knowledge from it that we need such that we can deploy our application. Now, Docker is a platform to install and run software on any given computer. Now you can run it on any platform, so it runs on Mac, Windows, and Linux. Now, Docker makes life really easy for installing and running software without having to go through a whole bunch of setup or installation dependencies. Now, Docker is made up of several tools and pieces of software that come together to form a platform or an ecosystem around creating and running something called containers. Now, to understand what a container is, we first have to understand what an image is. An image is a single file that contains all of the dependencies and all the configurations required to run a very specific program. So for example, let's say we want to run Node.js. Now we can get a Node.js image. The Docker Hub is where you can get pre-configured images. So you can get a Node image, you can get a Redis image, you can get all kinds of images. Now you can get a Node.js image from a Docker Hub and have it stored on your hard drives so that we can run it at some point in time later on. Now, the image is a single file that gets stored on your hard drive with all the dependencies and the configuration it needs to run. So a container is an instance of an image, and you can think of it as being like a running program, and a container is a program with its own isolated set of hardware resources, so nothing else is interfering with it. So it kind of has its own little set of space of memory, its little space of networking technology, and its own space of hard drive segmented as well, only for that particular program. Now we need to make an important distinction between an image and a container. Now, as there sometimes comes about some confusion as to the difference between the two. Now, anytime we talk about an image, we're really talking about a file system snapshot. So this is essentially a kind of like a copy and paste of a very specific set of directories or files. And so it might have an image that contains just Chrome and Python, for example. And this image will also contain a specific startup command and configuration settings. Now we're going to look at obviously setting up Docker in detail in the next steps. A container, on the other hand, is the execution or running instance of an image. So the image, as we said, is a snapshot. And a container, on the other hand, is the execution of a running instance of an image. So you create containers from images. Now, since images are in a way just templates that you can just start or run them, what you can do is use that image as a base to build a container. Now, a container is ultimately just a running image. Now, to create a container, the kernel isolates a little section of the hard drive and it makes it available to just the container. So we can kind of imagine that after the little section is created, the file snapshot inside the image is taken and is placed inside that segment of the hard drive. Now, inside of this very specific grouping of resources, we've got a little section of the hard drive that just has a single application and its dependencies installed and essentially nothing else. And that's why Docker is really popular, because what it's essentially doing is it's going to segment out, or it partitions out the different programs that you have running. So you can have different versions. So you can have, say, Python 3 and Python 2 running on the same machine in different Docker containers, and they're going to work just fine without interfering with each other. So in the next steps, we're going to look at how we can install Docker, and then we're going to go on to creating a Docker file for our API application.